My name is Carol Dobson. I am the moderator for this session, and I would like to give you guys a little heads up. I will be posting a link to an attendance survey towards the end of the session. Also, a link to the session survey, whether or not you like the survey, the presentation. And that will also be towards the end of the session. As I mentioned, I will be recording this session, and I would like to let you know the name of this session is called Choices Matter, Complicity and Action During the Holocaust. This is room number 1, and the presenter today is Kim Klett. If you guys would like to welcome Miss Klett.
Thank you so much. All right, so yes, we are going to be talking about complicity and action during the Holocaust. My name is Kim Klett, and I'm a teacher in Mesa, Arizona. I am an English teacher, but I teach a year-long Holocaust literature course that I developed in 2001. And I've been teaching it since. I've been teaching for 31 years. I'm a senior facilitator for Echoes and Reflections and a museum teacher fellow from USHMM. And just a couple things to give you background. If you are not familiar with Echoes and Reflections, we've been around since 2005, and we support middle and high school teachers in teaching about the Holocaust. And yes, you do have 2 attendance forms to fill out, just saw the chat box. So please do those. We have worked with, that's well over now 100,000 educators across the country. We have 3 partners, Yad Vashem, which is the museum in Israel. We also partner with the USC Shoah Foundation in Los Angeles, and then also with the Anti-Defamation League. So those are the groups that we work with. Our goals for today, we are doing what's kind of a specialty program today. So we, with our goals, want to make sure that we are exploring that sound pedagogy for planning and implementing Holocaust education in the classroom. We want to understand how the bystander and upstander roles manifest during the Holocaust on individual, community, national, and international levels. We also want to understand that the Holocaust was not an inevitable historical tragedy, but a sum of a series of choices. We want to access tools and resources to teach about the Holocaust through the lens of choices and acts of complicity that inspire students to seek change. And then we want to connect case studies on choices and complicity during the Holocaust to today and foster positive student action in their schools and communities. So I hope we can do all that in a little under an hour, right? It's a very ambitious schedule, but we will get it done. And I'm just going to put in the chat box one more time if you need the Echoes and Reflections. There is the sign-in sheet for us. So I want you to kind of just think about in your own classroom how you might approach the topic of bystanders, how your own students might think about what that means. And again, thinking about bystanders on all those different levels, not only the individual, but also like national and international levels. And so we're going to go in just a minute. After we look at the pedagogical principles, we're going to look at a Padlet quickly and fill that out to kind of start thinking about this topic. But with Echoes and Reflections, we always want to make sure we cover our pedagogical principles. So we always want to define terms and examine anti-Semitism. We want to provide historical context, teach the human story, use primary sources, and all of our lessons include these factors. They also include help with making the Holocaust relevant for our students, encouraging critical thinking, fostering empathy, and ensuring a supportive learning environment. So keeping those good practices in mind as, again, we think about this topic. We're going to skip that one because we definitely don't have time, but these are the questions. Let me get, I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 second because I need to grab the Padlet link. And so we're going to go to a Padlet, and I just want you to fill in as many as you can of the questions, so you can kind of decide. But it's going to be asking you questions about when people should intervene and when they maybe might not be comfortable doing so. And so you can go to this link I'm getting in the chat box right now, and it will take you to the Padlet, and then I'll open it. So there you go. And then I'll open that and share the screen so we can see what people are thinking. So take a few minutes and fill that out.
I'm sorry, Kim, is the Padlet gonna pop up? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, if you click on that link, it should open. That I just put in the chat box. It looks like people are on it. And a couple of people are just coming in, so I'm going to put that in again if you don't see it. So if you're just joining us, there's the link to the Padlet. Yeah, it looks like people are on it. I'm going to share the screen so we can see it. So I'll give you about 1 more minute to answer those, and then we'll do a recap. Yeah, and so let's just kind of look at what we've put here. What factors influence an individual's choice to intervene? A lot of you are saying past experiences, maybe their morals, you know, kind of what they feel about the situation, biases as well. Yep, personal values. When do we feel it's necessary to step in? Somebody said always. If someone's in danger of injury, natural rights have been infringed upon. Yeah, when there's some kind of wrong occurring. It depends. A lot of my students say that when we talk about this as well. Yeah, when someone's under distress, it's clear they're the victim. And then with this one, I typically get these responses from students and adults. Exactly, when is it dangerous or unwise to step in? Usually it comes down to safety, right? Bodily harm, outnumbered, yeah, not safe anymore, weapons involved maybe. And then what do you hope your students take away from a discussion on this? I see a lot of empathy, yeah, having courage. I see the word courage coming up a lot, to be more than just a bystander. I think that's a big goal. And I like that word here with that they're empowered, right, to demonstrate what they know. Exactly. So thank you for playing along with that. I just wanted you again to kind of think about those factors. So next we're going to be looking at an event in history where there were a lot of bystanders, and that is Kristallnacht. We are going to look at that event and how different people responded to it. So Kristallnacht is also known as the Night of Broken Glass in the Holocaust. It occurred from November 9th and 10th of 1938. And this was when the Nazis and others torched synagogues. They vandalized Jewish homes and schools and businesses. 91 Jews were killed. And this is what a lot of people see as a turning point to the Holocaust, because at this point, 30,000 Jewish men are arrested and sent to concentration camps just for being Jewish, right? For no other reason. And so this happened because of a shooting in Paris. There was a young man named Herschel Greenspan. He was upset that his parents had been deported from Germany to Poland, and he went into the German embassy building in Paris and said he was going to shoot the first person he saw. The man he shot was named Ernst von Roth, and he died a couple of days later. And so I want to show you a testimony, but I also want to show you where you would find this. So you can either follow along with me on the screen, or if you would rather, you can open it up on your own computer so that you can learn how to use the program as well. So I'm going to go back to this and then open Echoes and Reflections. And so when you go to our website, it's just echoesandreflections.org. It's going to take a minute. There we go. And sorry, I had this open for something else. So I'm going to show you when you open it up. It's going to look a little bit different, but you're always going to go to that Teach on the menu. It'll take just a minute. Sorry, it's kind of slow because so many of us are on, I think, today. There we go. And under Teach, we have lesson plans. The lesson plans are really units. And you can see there are 11 of them. They're really good, all of them. I use something from every unit in my teaching. We are going to be going to the unit called Nazi Germany. And so you just click on that. Okay, and every unit is set up exactly the same, where you have a quote from a testimony that's in the unit. You have keywords for every unit. They're different for every unit. You have your academic standards for both social studies and English, and they're broken down by lesson. You have your essential questions and your objectives. So what I love about Echoes and Reflections is that if you're new to teaching the Holocaust or you're a new teacher, everything is outlined for you. If you're like me and you've been teaching a long time or a while, it's still, I pick and choose. I might not use everything and I might not utilize everything in the units, but I use a lot of it, right? And I can see what works with my particular lessons and units as well. So it's broken into lesson plans. That's why I said these should be called units. We're going to scroll down to the unit. It's on Kristallnacht, and I'll try not to go too fast because it might make you dizzy. Here we go, the Kristallnacht program. And we are going to watch a testimony from just one of them. There are two. We're going to watch this by Kurt Messerschmidt. And as we're watching this, I want you to think about who he's talking about. Who are the bystanders? Who are the victims? Who are the perpetrators, right? Who are the different actors who are making choices, except for the victim? They don't have a choice. But who are the people who are making choices to act or not act in this situation? You always get a short biography, and I share this with my students when I share these testimonies. So Mr. Messerschmidt was born in 1915 in Vernugen, Germany. He was forced to live in the Theresienstadt ghetto, later imprisoned in the concentration camps of Flossenburg, Sachsenhausen, Golschau, and Gonacher. Kurt was also a prisoner in the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp. And when the war began, he was 24 years old. So he would have been about 23 or 24 when this event occurred. Okay. All right. So here's his testimony. Sorry, it's taken a minute.
In 1938, it's one of those dates which I can never forget, and we all don't forget it. When November 10th every year comes around, I'm the one who remembers this day vividly, while even my non-American friends, American Jewish friends, don't remember it unless they read finally about it. This was the so-called Kristallnacht. That night, I listened to the radio, forbidden, BBC, the night before, and read all about what had happened in Paris, and that measurements would be taken to avenge the death of this Herrn vom Rath, killed by a Jewish boy. I listened to the radio in a friend's house, and I rushed home, woke up the next morning. My transportation to school was about 7 miles, was by bicycle. I was fortunate at that point. I still was allowed to have a bicycle. All these things were taken away later. I went through all these things, we lost everything. But on bicycle, I went through 7 miles of glass splinters. It's amazing that the bicycle lasted. And my dear colleague, Uri Sonnenfeld, who was the main sports coach, was still there, and we sat there for a moment, deciding what to do. But there was no question. We took our bicycles and made a tour of the whole city of Berlin. We came to Friedrichstraße. It's a well-known term now. There was a little, very tiny cigar shop. The owner was a very, very old man, tiny old gentleman. But there were people standing around, 40, 50 people, and 2 of the Sturmabteilung, the SA, not SS. SS are the one in the black uniforms, and and these are the brown shirts. Of course, with all their equipment, and they forced this very old gentleman to pick up the tiny glass splitters one by one. And they forced this man to do this. And they all were standing there and watching. We didn't know what to think, but the only thing we could think of was help. So we put our bicycles down. Rudy and I, we went in front of that group that was surrounding this old gentleman, went down on our knees, and started picking up glass splitters, one by one, to help this man. Briefly, I looked at the 2 guys. They didn't blink. They didn't move. Why did they not move? I asked myself. Are they afraid that the people might agree with us or not? I've never figured out what it was. But I'm sure in this particular situation that some of the people standing there disapproved of what the Nazis did. But their disapproval was only silence. And silence is what did the harm.
Very powerful. And I want to point out that these testimonies are very short. His is actually one of the longer ones. Some of them are just a few minutes long. And so you can replay them. My students really, really like these testimonies. They're very powerful. So thinking about the idea of choices, right? Obviously, let's start with who's the victim. And you can put it in the chat box. Who's the victim? I think a lot of people in there are, right? But specifically, there was one person. Yeah, the shop owner. And he's elderly, which makes him more vulnerable, right? And so who are the upstanders, we might call them today? Yep, Kurt and Rudy. And my question to my students after we watch this is, why did they do it? And oftentimes they say because he was an old man, right? That there's a responsibility that they might feel. Who are the perpetrators in it? Yeah, exactly, Nancy. They're showing empathy, right? They relate. I always have to remind them too that Rudy and Kurt are Jewish, and they're taking a chance because remember, Kurt at least is like 23, 24 years old. He easily could have been arrested, right? They were arresting Jewish men. So he really is taking quite a risk. Who are the perpetrators and how many are there? And he was very specific about who they were as well. Yeah, the SA, the brown shirts. And do we remember how many there were? 2. Which, oftentimes my students then think, because how many bystanders were there, did he say? Anybody remember? Yeah, 40 to 50. That is a lot. Yeah, 40 to 50. And so, having that discussion with your students, there are 40 to 50 people who still stood by even after they saw that Rudy and Kurt were not getting in trouble, because they kind of looked up at the guys, he said, right, to see, are they going to say or do anything? And they didn't. And he said maybe because, the brown shirts thought that the others agreed, but nobody stepped down and helped them pick up all that glass, right? So it's a great testimony to show when you want to talk about bystanders and the role of that. And then what about that last line when he said that there was only silence, but silence is what did the harm? Their disapproval was only silence, and silence is what did the harm. Any thoughts on that? I actually have a poster that says that in my classroom because it's such, I think, a strong statement. Yeah, it's the unknown, right? Because who knows? We don't know what any of those people are thinking, right? We got Kurt's perspective on it. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, it's akin to approval because you're not stepping in and saying or doing anything. Yeah. Okay, so in the interest of time, again, in a longer session, we could spend more time unpacking that line. I think it's such a great one. Yeah, I see silence means it doesn't hurt me. I'll get involved maybe when it does, right? I just wanted to show you, since we're here, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the website today because this is, like I said, one of our specialty programs. But I did want to show you the assets in this lesson. I use these every year when I teach about Kristallnacht. They have photographs. They have a bunch of information. Where is it? Here we go. There's another photograph. There are Heydrich's instructions for what was supposed to happen that night and not supposed to happen. There's a letter from a woman who had money stolen. There's a narrative from a man who runs an orphanage and their reaction to it. And again, more photographs. And then there's also a document analysis for all of those. And I used that this year with these resources. And it's a graphic organizer where the students can, look at all of these and read these pieces and then respond to them. So I just wanted to show you where that is because it's such a great lesson. Okay, but now we are going to go back to let's stop sharing because we're going to go back to the PowerPoint for most of the rest of our time together. And this goes back to, again, those questions that we answered on the Padlet. Here we go. Those are the things we looked at with Kurt. There's that quote. And now I'd like to look at this. This is called the Pyramid of Hate. It is in the unit on Echoes and Reflections on Anti-Semitism. It's the second unit when you're looking at that list on the website. And I use this with my students. I really like it. Down here at the bottom, a little bit of it got cut off, but basically it's biased attitudes, right? So it could be that you accept a stereotype about a group, or maybe you scapegoat or make an insensitive comment. You use language that's non-inclusive, right? These are biased attitudes. And this is the lowest level of the pyramid. That goes up then to acts of bias. So now, like I always explain to my students, here on the biased attitudes level, you might hear a joke that's racist or sexist or whatever, and maybe you don't challenge it, maybe even laugh at it. But now on this level, you're telling it, right? So you're actively participating in it. You're calling someone names, or you're excluding somebody because of who they are, right? And then that can go up to discrimination if it's unchecked. And again, I always explain to my students, these are illegal, but we still see them happening, right? And so this is that level where, things like if we look at Nazi Germany, the 1935 Nuremberg laws made all of these perfectly acceptable and legal against the Jewish people and others. And then here it goes up to bias motivated violence. So murder. Today it could be cyber terrorism, right? Arson. These are some of the things we saw during Kristallnacht. Like I said, 91 people were killed. There was the arson specifically of the synagogues, right? That would go to this one too, the desecration of a house of worship, right? There were assaults, all kinds of things. And so what I want you to think about with this, again, if we had more time, we could be more hands-on with it, but just think about how these things escalate because they're not checked, right? That people, if they don't say anything or do anything against these, they just keep going up. And I always explain to my students, that doesn't mean that, because we hear a racist joke or something, at this point, it doesn't mean next week there's going to be, violence, but there could be. It could escalate that quickly, right? The potential is there. So think about, again, where in the history of the Holocaust, like even thinking of the testimony we just saw, where could people have stepped in and stopped some of the things that happened? At what point could that have ended this progression? Could it have, right? Or in any other, you could use this with any genocide. And then thinking about why weren't those steps taken and what choices, because we're talking about choices here, what choices were made instead, right? Any thoughts or questions about the pyramid of hate? Holly's saying if you let the little things go, yep, exactly. It opens the door to bigger things. I totally agree with that. And I think this shows it, right? It's a great example of that.
Can I ask a question, Kim?
Please, yeah.
Is it always linear, or could it be a combination of all these things, or happen at the same time too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They tend to build, right? And feed off of each other. And so this is kind of the way I use it with my students. But you're right, you could have several of these things happening very quickly, right? But typically we see it starting somewhere where, again, it's easier to kind of blow off, and just say, oh, it's just a joke. Or, I didn't mean anything by that. But you still said it, right? I always tell my students, you said it, you put it out in the world, right? And so that can lead then to those next levels. Okay. And again, this is a great resource. It's in that anti-Semitism unit. This is an activity. We have a timeline. We're not going to do this because we don't have the time, but you can use the timeline with your students and have them look for examples of each of those levels and use Post-it notes or write it on a paper copy, and it can be a really good lesson as well.
Kim, can I add something real quick?
Please.
I know I took a series of Holocaust courses from a woman here in Clark County, Susan Dubin. She's amazing. And she shared with us different books you can use with kids, the younger kids that don't understand or have that abstract thinking. They are still at a concrete level. I know there's a Dr. Seuss where they all were red or green. I can't think of the name of it, but using those books can help with the younger one.
Oh, I lost. I think you were saying about the younger ones. I think we lost the connection or something, but yeah, absolutely. And again, you want to be careful. Again, you want to go back to that pedagogy and, make sure that you're not giving them too much. But yeah, some of those younger books that are geared toward younger kids could be very effective. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. And so, again, thinking about these questions with the pyramid of hate, what is the cost when an individual doesn't act to interrupt justice? What's the harm to the victims, but also to society as a whole? And so something just to think about again. Martin Niemöller, you might be familiar with this quote. It's quite famous. He was a German Protestant minister, and he survived the camps. He was in Sachsenhausen and Dachau, because he was sent there because of his outspoken criticism of the Nazi Party in Germany. And he said, in Germany, the Nazis came for the communists, and I did not speak up because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, there was no one left to speak up. And again, I have a poster of this in my room as well, and it's very effective, for students thinking about the repercussions of being that bystander, because you might want someone to speak up for you as well at some point, right? So just to kind of wrap up this part of the session, historians point out that the majority of Germans were pretty indifferent to the plight of the Jews. It's like what somebody said earlier, it didn't affect them, so they didn't necessarily pay attention. Their attitude wasn't necessarily rooted in hatred, but in apathy. And so that might be something that you could talk to your students about, both apathy for a lot of Germans in Nazi Germany, but then also how we today, and our students become apathetic and why, and how that happens. So I want to move on and look at some more bystander roles and images. And these mostly come from Kristallnacht. Here we have a synagogue burning. This is in Frankfurt, Germany. And obviously the flames and, the burning, you can see inside the windows as well, and all of this destruction happening. That's where your eye probably goes first. But then when you start looking down here at the bottom of the picture, what's happening and what's not happening?
Looks like people are just staring.
Yeah, we have a lot of bystanders, don't we?
And it could
You
just
know?
be from shock. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I wouldn't even know what to do if I saw something that massive. Like what?
Exactly. And we're not saying that people should be, fighting it themselves, but maybe going for help. What we don't see any water directed, right? There's no hose or fire truck or anything like that that's happening at this point. And I think you're right. A lot of people would be curious. Think about it. Anytime there's a fire, you have, people looking and watching and such.
I
Yeah,
don't
go
see
ahead.
I don't see any empathy. They kind of isolated themselves from what is happening, just like
Yeah.
watching sort of show. So it's as if they're not a part of it.
Exactly. They're very removed, and partially probably for safety, right? But yeah, they're very removed from it. And we can't see their faces, but yeah, there's probably a lot of curiosity. I just want to mention real quickly that, there are lots of techniques to get our students to slow down and look at pictures. And one of the ways is, like making a quadrant on this picture and having people look at different sections, or maybe even within this little group down here, making a quadrant, right? Or zooming in as we can. So think about that, because our students often just, like on their phones, they flip through pictures really quickly. Yeah, okay, so again, in the interest of time, so I'm watching my clock here, you could do a see, think, wonder with this. But then also, I want us to think, because we're going to look at a few more photographs. How did the actions of ordinary people shape the events of the Holocaust? Okay, so this is a picture from 1938. What's happening? What do you notice?
Well, people are marching somewhere. They're lined up in rows.
Yeah. What kind of people do you notice just by looking at them?
Men.
Men. Yeah,
Looks like
it's men.
guilty people going to the court, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of men, you're right. It is called Men Paraded. Who else do you see in the crowd?
Children.
Yeah, there's some kids over here.
Other family members, children. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of people lined up kind of watching over here. And then where else do we see people? Yeah, there's some people in uniform. Notice this person, and I don't know if you can tell, but they're photographing this. They're kind of off to the side and up. This might be like a little park or something. And they're taking a photograph. This is after Kristallnacht. This was on November 10th. And these are men who have been arrested and are being publicly shamed. The Nazis were yelling, "Here are the Jews, do to them what you will." And some of the bystanders who witnessed this and spoke about it later said that they were kind of embarrassed, actually, by what was happening. The children are there. Kristallnacht happened during the week. So people the next day were going to school, they were going to work, it was business as usual. And a principal actually was handing out candy to children at this so-called parade, right? And encouraging this kind of behavior. We don't know who the photographer is. I get the sense that maybe it's just somebody who, realizes, wow, this is an important moment and I'm going to document it. But we don't know anything else about the person taking the picture. Could have been a local journalist, but I don't know. To me, it just seems like an onlooker, another bystander who wants to document this. We have another photograph. This is taken in the same time period. How do we know for sure? How could we tell that this is Kristallnacht?
Looks like glass been
Yeah,
broken at the top there.
yep, up here. And also here, look, you can see a woman coming out of the, kind of like plate glass window. Any idea what's happening here? This is also the next day, so November 10th.
Well, it says Mayor Reich. Does that have something to do with it? Right.
It is a department store, yes, and it was Jewish owned.
Oh, okay.
And Tommy got it. Yes, they're looting. They are looting, which, remember I showed you in the third unit where we had that lesson on Kristallnacht. If you read Heydrich's orders, there was to be no looting of any of the items from these stores. And yet people are, like I said, this woman's coming out. The first time I saw this picture, I thought, oh, people were walking their babies. No, they brought the strollers because they could put more stuff in it to steal. Here's a woman carrying a very heavy, it looks like a suitcase or something. This woman too, she's holding on with both hands because she has so much stuff she's taken. And
But
these are
I'm sorry, the police were not stopping the looting either, is something to notice here too.
Yeah, nobody's stopping it. It's I've seen this photo. It's not officially called this, but I've heard people call it legal looting because, yeah, it was absolutely, even though it was in Heydrich's orders not to do this, but okay, yeah, we can take stuff now. We can take advantage of the moment, right? Now, this photo is a little bit different, looking at bystanders, but it's still the same idea of the bystanders. It has nothing to do with Kristallnacht. Do we know what all these people are doing?
It looks like they're camping out because there's bags of their personal belongings. Like you can take one bag per person, and they're trying to, maybe this is sort of a ghetto even.
Yeah, you're very close. This is a deportation. This was actually in Amsterdam in 1942. And I like this picture because I like the perspective, because you know that it's the neighbor up here who's taking the picture, right? Because you can see they've been having coffee, they've been watching this. These are their neighbors, right? These are their neighbors. They know these people, and these people are going to be deported to Westerbork, which is where Anne Frank and her family were sent. Where else besides the people who were up here, where else do we see bystanders in this picture? Yeah, upstairs, right over here. Oops, sorry, up above where my arrow is. And we also have these kids, right? Maybe some of their friends are being taken. Maybe they're just curious, right? And yeah, of course, whoever took the picture, right? So we've got different bystanders here. I'm going to stop the share for just a minute because I want to share the resource that this came from, and to grab it, I have a link for you. This came from an exhibit from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum that they had, but they always put their temporary exhibits online, and they have really good resources with them. And I use this one in my classroom. It's called Summer Neighbors, and here is the link if you want to grab that. Really great resource. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. So again, the idea of the bystanders that we get here, again, thinking about what this makes us think, feel, wonder, understand, good exercise to do with your students. Again, and with the lack of time, I'm going to move on. A question that comes up a lot of times with this is, why didn't the Jewish people just leave Europe, right? Why didn't they just go? And I'm gonna, oh gosh, I have to stop the share, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to another resource for you. that is also through the USHMM. Okay, and it is, I don't know if you guys watched the Ken Burns documentary on PBS, but he used a lot of the newer Americans in the Holocaust exhibit at USHMM. And it's wonderful. I use this resource a lot in the classroom. But for example, just showing the kids what did you need to do to obtain a US visa in the 30s. And so they go through the steps. And I love the fact that they use these primary source materials because the whole exhibit is based on primary source materials. And so again, I'm not going to read through these. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of this, and I'll give you the link to it as well. But it just shows the students, because they always ask that question, well, if it's so bad, why didn't they just leave? Because it's not that easy, right? And we have some testimonies on Echoes and Reflections as well that address that issue. The biggest part was you had to have a sponsor, right? And after a certain point, you had to have 2 sponsors. And so it was very difficult to get that if you didn't know anybody in the US. And so I'll go ahead and put the link for that in the chat box as well, so that you have access to that. And then I'll go back to the PowerPoint because I have a couple of other things from that that you might be interested in. And this is the last link that I'll give you for other resources. I don't want to overwhelm, but I also want to make sure that you have these resources because they're really fantastic. There we go. Okay. Also on that site, and I'm not going to go to it because again, we just don't have time, but also on that Americans in the Holocaust. And again, if we had more time, I would have you each read one of these, but they have different actions that people took. Some are good, some are bad. They also have, like for example, Breckinridge Long was at the State Department here in the US, and he was really bad about not letting people in. There was an American couple, the Sharps, who actually saved a lot of people. They are 2 of, I think, 5 Americans who are on the list of the righteous amongst the nations, you know, people who helped rescue and help others. But anyway, it's a really good resource, and those are just some of the stories that you would find on there. I also wanted to mention they have a lot of polls, like Roper and Gallup polls that were taken at the time. And just to give you one of those numbers and statistics, right after Kristallnacht, which was in our newspapers here in the US, every newspaper carried that story the next day. It was huge news. 94% of Americans after Kristallnacht indicated that they disapproved of what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. 94%. But 71% said they did not want to take in Jews from Germany at that time. So just, you know, again, thinking about choices and decisions that governments make. This is another one where you could look at the timeline that we have on our website and look at reactions of nations, right? And like the Kinder Transport, where the British government took nearly 10,000 Jewish children from Germany and Czechoslovakia and Austria and found homes for them. You have the Evian conference where, you know, FDR convened, and this was right before Kristallnacht, but he convened 32 countries in France to talk about what are we going to do about this refugee crisis, and nothing was done, right, in the end. So those are some things you could have your students do, and again, that we would do if we had more time. I like to use this painting. It's called The Refugee. And again, thinking about the choices, refugees don't have many choices, right? And so it's interesting for students to analyze. My kids love to analyze art. And, you know, they always notice that he's kind of almost in like this fetal position. This is by a man named Felix Nussbaum, who knew what being a refugee was like. He left Nazi Germany and he hid in Belgium. He was in Brussels hiding for, I believe, like 2 years. He and his wife were in hiding, and he continued to paint while he was in hiding, but eventually he got caught. and was sent to Auschwitz, where both he and his wife were murdered. But, you know, he knew this lack of options, like that you see, you know, the globe seems like so out of reach for him. Yes, there's a door, but it looks pretty, you know, dead outside, right? So I like to use that. That's also on the Echoes and Reflections website. The last part I want to end with is, you know, thinking about, okay, well, what are our students? We've talked about bystanders and not being a bystander. We've talked about choices that we can make, when we can intervene and such. We also don't want our students to think that they have to be a hero, right? Because like Neepke said, people called her a hero and she didn't like it because that makes you think that you have to be a really special person. And then you start thinking, well, I could never do that. And so recognizing that, you know, the people who help are usually common people. They make a choice, right? It's all about choices. And so this is just in response to that quote, some questions, but then thinking about getting our students to be allies or advocates. And this is a project that your students could do where they find a problem in their school, in their community, in their city or state, and actually build an action plan. My students are doing this right now. I gave them, one of their topics is actually anti-Semitism today. And so they are just going to town on it. They have the best ideas. And so like I have a group that's doing a podcast and another group is doing some PSAs to put on the announcements. And another group is bringing in a speaker, you know, and they're just really having fun with it and really getting into it. So again, we don't want them just to think that they can't do anything because they're young, right? Okay, so there's your information about Echoes and Reflections. We do trainings both online and in person. So if you're interested, please do contact us. We do work with districts, with regions, with cities, you know, however you want to set it up, and we can do specialty programs like what I just did today, or we can also do other programs where we just kind of give you the basics of like using our website. I'll be doing one of those today. Before you leave, I do have an evaluation form to fill out as well. So let me share that link with you. Does anybody have any other questions though, before we depart here?
Yes, thank you. It was really great. And I'm going to come to the next one, but I'm getting confused with all these and teach switching screens with all these surveys and logins. You have an evaluation and they have an evaluation. They should tweak that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Carol, if it's something where we could share it with the participants, like at the end, if they're not able to do it at the time. Because yeah, I think it could be very overwhelming. I agree.
I will mention that to the organizers.
Okay, and maybe if you could open the evaluation, and if you don't have time to do it right now, just kind of remember, you know, and fill it out later, that's fine. And again, this was my name's Kim Klett, and again, it's Choices Matter is what the session is called. Sorry, I'm doing 4 different ones today. So this one is Choices Matter, Complicity in the Holocaust. And this is presented by the ADL, because I think it has to be that as well. And I hope that you're able to use Echoes and Reflections in your classroom. It really is a valuable resource.
Just a reminder, the next session starts at 10:20. If you would like to stay in this room, the next session is also with Kim Klett. It's called Spotlight on Contemporary Anti-Semitism. So thank you guys for coming, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Thanks, everybody.